Can I share my slides or?
So just give me a minute. I will first give the introduction, then you can share your slides. Okay. So very good evening, doctors. Pratik here from Harmonica Acumentis. Today we have conducted a very good CME on management of COVID positive patients. So today, very renowned doctor with us, Dr. Ajit from Kunnur. I would like to introduce him. So Dr. Ajit is an additional professor and HOD, Department of Obs and Gynae, GMC Kannur. He is a KFOG president, then past vice president and joint secretary of KFOG, past chairperson and research committee of KFOG, coordinator of maternal near miss review of KFOG, past president of Kannur Obs and Gynae Society, and a fellow representative of AICC ARCOG SZ. So, very good evening all. I have welcomed all delegates and our speaker, Dr. Ajit. Yeah, over to you, sir.
Thank you, Pratik. Let me share my screen.
Yes, sir.
I hope it is visible to all.
Yes, sir, it's visible.
Am I audible properly?
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Okay. At the outset, I would like to thank the Acumentis, particularly Pratik and Sri Kumar, for inviting me for this webinar. So we will be discussing on the management of COVID positive pregnancy. We had the first wave of COVID. The second wave actually affected the pregnancies very badly, and many mothers died. If you take the example of Kerala, in the first 1 year of the COVID, the first wave, we had only 7 maternal deaths. But in the second wave, there were very severe symptomatic women. And unfortunately, we lost about 40 mothers over the last 2 or 3 months. So that is the importance of knowing about the management of COVID positive pregnancies. So if you take the guidelines, and if you take the discussions, the whole of the discussion is based on the RCOG guideline, which came in February 2021, and the ACOG guideline, and again, the Kerala Federation of Obstetricians and Gynecologists made a practice recommendation. So actually in Kerala, we are following this guideline, and I think it will be applicable to at national level also, because all these things are based on the RCOG guideline and American College guideline. If you take the COVID-19 and pregnancy, one important point we should always remember is these are based on few number of cases. We don't have a high quality evidence. There is no randomized control trial. Most of the evidence is based on the observational studies. Pregnant women do not appear more likely to contract infection. Just because of the pregnancy, there is nothing like that. She is at risk of developing infection. And more than 2/3 are asymptomatic. But when pregnant women develop infection, there is more chance of getting symptomatic infections and more severe illness, especially when it occurs towards the later part of pregnancy, especially after the 24 weeks of pregnancy. Who are the high-risk women? for the severe infections or critically ill infections. Obese women, when the BMI is more than 25, age more than 35 years, and when there is a pre-existing diabetes and chronic hypertension. And if you take all the maternal death, one common factor we noted is that they are obese and diabetic. So obesity, pre-existing diabetes, and chronic hypertension at age more than 35 years are the risk factors. And there is some suggestion that the vitamin D deficiency is also a risk factor for developing more severe symptoms. The CDC consider pregnant women are at increased risk category. Symptomatic pregnant women with COVID-19 are at increased risk of more severe illness, and they need actually more ICU admission, more chance of ICU admission compared to the non-pregnant women, more need for invasive ventilation, and actually we are seeing more death also in pregnant compared to non-pregnant women. But here, one important point we have to consider is, but still the absolute risk of maternal death is less compared to the H1N1 pandemic, which are more severe actually. H1N1 pandemic was more severe, more maternal death occurred than H1N1. What is the effect on the pregnancy? In symptomatic women, asymptomatic women, pregnant women, there is no much rise of any complication. But symptomatic pregnant women, there is a 2 to 3 times more risk of preterm delivery. Preterm delivery may be the spontaneous preterm delivery, or maybe iatrogenic because of the symptoms we have to deliver the mothers early. So there is a 2 to 3 times higher risk of preterm delivery. In all studies, it is mentioned. Fortunately, there is no increased risk of congenital anomalies if it occurs in the first trimester, and there is no risk of FGR and stillbirth in as per the most of the studies. But again, the new observation, few of the observation studies are coming up in the way of there's an increased chance of FGR and stillbirth. So nowadays we recommend as ultrasound 2 weeks after recovery from the infection. There is increased risk of cesarean section. Everywhere there is a worldwide, there is an increased rate of cesarean section. Higher rate of perinatal mental health disorders. That is another thing we noted. There is more chance of anxiety and depression in patients with COVID-19 infection and pregnancy. Once, even asymptomatic women, when she is a pregnant woman, naturally it will go to the category B. So we have divided the category B into B1 and B2. If it is asymptomatic, it is B1. If it is symptomatic or with comorbidities like hypertension, diabetes, then we divide this into we categorize it into B2, because at any time they can become category C. So we have to reassess this B2 group every 24 to 48 hours. And category C means when there is red flag signs, breathlessness, chest pain, drowsiness, hypotension, hemoptysis, cyanosis, then naturally it will become the category C. Again, the classification to mild, moderate, and severe based on the pulse rate, respiratory rate, and SpO2. When the respiratory rate is less than 24, it's mild. 24 to 29 is moderate. Severe is more than 30. More than 30, the respiratory rate is severe. SpO2 again, more than 94, mild. 91 to 94 is moderate, and less than 90 SpO2 is a severe infection. Most of the case of category B1, that is asymptomatic women, can be cared at home unless she is very near to term. They have to advise to take adequate hydration, avoid bed rest because the pregnancy itself is a it promotes coagulation. And again, the emerging evidence that the COVID-19 is also can cause more coagulation. So it is a procoagulable state. So avoid bed rest and ask the women to take adequate hydration to prevent the complications of thromboembolism. It is better to have a pulse oximeter, and one advice we tell them is to go for a 6-minute walk test or 40 steps she has to walk, and then again measure the pulse of SpO2. If there is a fall in the SpO2 by 3%, that means she needs hospital admission. Or even SpO2 less than 94, or if she is symptomatic at any time, she has to be admitted. So when it is category B2, SpO2 less than 94, or a positive 6-minute walk test, that means 3% fall in the SpO2 on 6-minute walk or taking 40 steps, then she needs hospital admission or more investigations. Hospital admission if near time or any obstetric risk factors in even category B1. Category B2 can be admitted in the CSLTC, but daily checking of vitals, SpO2, walk test, everything is important. We have to do the basic investigations, CBC, RFT, LFT, serum electrolytes, CRP, ECG. Again, it differs depending upon the institution, but these are the usual things we do. Chest X-ray, we take in all patients with respiratory symptoms or any cough. D-dimer, CPK, ferritin, LDH, if symptoms persist. The treatment is symptomatic. Paracetamol fever, and for the cough, we give antitussives. Is it necessary to give oseltamivir? Oseltamivir is not useful in COVID-19. But if the patient is having symptoms, the respiratory symptoms, we cannot rule out H1N1. In the beginning itself, I told you, H1N1 is more dangerous one than the COVID-19 as far as the pregnancy is concerned. So if there is any confusion or any, usually it is the way we, any patients with respiratory symptoms in pregnancy, we start oseltamivir. So the same applies to the COVID-19 pregnant women also, because always we cannot rule out a COVID H1N1 coexisting H1N1 infection. So there are reports in various parts of the world about the coexisting H1N1 along with the COVID-19. So again, it's a controversial thing, but this is the way we treat any patients with the respiratory symptoms. We give oseltamivir. These are the pro-inflammatory markers usually we check, especially in suspicious cases. CRP, D-dimer, ferritin, LDH, the neutrophil lymphocyte ratio, and the absolute lymphocyte count. CRP more than 100. D-dimer, again, this depends upon the trimester. In the first trimester, the cutoff value is 1.6 to 1.2, up to 169 to 1202. Up to 3.2 is normal in the second trimester. Up to 3.3 is normal in the third trimester. So if it's more than 3.3, then we take it as centimeter. Ferritin more than 300. For LDH more than 400. The neutrophil lymphocyte ratio more than 3.13, and the absolute lymphocyte count less than 0.8 are suggestive of pro-inflammatory states, or that these patients need special attention. Category C, admission in COVID designated center. It should be a multidisciplinary care. Every investigations has to be repeated every 48 hours, depending upon the individual case. You have to consider taking a HRCT thorax, proper obstetric history and examination, even though it is it's primarily, these patients are primarily cared by the physician, the obstetrician has to see the patient daily, and you have to rule out a bacterial sepsis, rule out opportunistic infections in the immunocompromised, especially patients on steroids. Prevention of venous thromboembolism is the most important thing. Pregnancy itself is a hypercoagulable state, and the COVID-19 again is a procoagulable state. So we have to prevent venous thromboembolism. Women self-isolating at home should take adequate hydration, and they should be mobilized, and we have to do the VT risk assessment. Admitted patients, always you have to give enoxaparin or the unfractionated heparin, depending upon the case. Most of the time we go for the enoxaparin, 1 milligram per kilogram body weight, and the common usual dose is 40 milligram. In obese women, usually we go for 60 milligram per day, unless the birth is expected within 12 years, or there is a significant risk of hemorrhage, or if the platelet count is less than 50,000, then we don't go for. Otherwise, always go for a covenant heparin. And it has to be continued throughout the stay in the hospital. And at the time of discharge, again for 10 days, you have to give. Aspirin is another drug suggested, but again, there is not much evidence for giving aspirin. The most important thing is heparin or the low molecular weight heparin. Patients admitted postpartum, within 6 weeks postpartum, they have to be given thromboprophylaxis. Higher dose in category C, severely ill patients and those with a high DDMR. In such cases, you have to go for sometimes a therapeutic dose rather than the prophylactic dose. Thrombocytopenia may be associated with severe COVID-19 infection. Low molecular weight heparin and aspirin should be stopped if the platelet count is less than 50,000. Mechanical aids like intermittent pneumatic compression stockings used if low molecular weight heparin is contraindicated. So what is the role of steroids? That is another common medication we use. And this is usually started as per the opinion of the physician. If there is respiratory symptoms of fever, we are consider giving budesonide 800 milligram MDA or DPA, BAD, if the symptoms persist beyond 5 days. So in the first 5 days, usually we don't give steroids, but the symptoms persist beyond 5 days, you have to consider giving steroids. Steroids, oral or parenteral, may be started if there is moderate or severe rise in the respiratory rate or fall in the SpO2, especially if it is SpO2 less than 90, and there is a 3% desaturation with a 6-minute walk test, or there is bronchopneumonia, or there is a marked rise in the pro-inflammatory markers, which we mentioned earlier. So these are the indications for starting steroids, and it should be always started 5 days after the onset of symptoms, not before 5 days. And one important point is you have to monitor the sugars, because there can be diabetic ketoacidosis in patients with steroids, even if the patient is not GDM or anything. And you have to expect a marginal rise in the total count. You cannot consider it as a sepsis. When you start steroids, there will be a rise in the TC. If steroids are indicated, which steroids? If lung maturity is indicated, then you have to go for the dexamethasone, 6 milligram 12 hourly 4 doses. And it is followed by IV methylprednisolone 0.5 to 1 milligram per kilogram or oral prednisolone 40 milligram per day for total 10 days. Don't continue with dexamethasone for 10 days, because when you give dexamethasone, there will be fetal adrenal suppression and can affect the baby. Again, dexamethasone is a very strong steroid. It can even predispose to sepsis and other opportunistic infection. So 4 doses you give for the lung maturity purpose, then it should be followed by IV methylprednisolone or oral prednisolone. That's the best thing. If steroids are not indicated for lung maturity, say you are seeing a patient in the early first trimester or second trimester, then you can definitely skip dexa and you can go for the methylprednisolone or oral prednisolone case. Should be given for total 10 days. But some cases you have to go for a long. The oseltamivir, the indication we discussed early, patients with respiratory symptoms, especially sore throat, all these things, we have to consider giving azithromycin depending on the case, or higher antibiotics if suspecting bacterial sepsis. Remdesivir is another drug. It is the safety in pregnancy is not established yet, but it may be used in category C with bronchopneumonia or when there is a fall in the SpO2. It needs to be started within 10 days. There is no point in starting remdesivir later. And it has to be given on a compassionate basis after getting informed consent. Tocilizumab is another drug, especially it is an interleukin-6 receptor antagonist useful in patients with hypoxia and evidence of systemic inflammation. Again, use in pregnancy is a controversial thing, but has to be considered on a case-by-case basis decided by the multidisciplinary team. Another very important point is if there is a persistent hypoxia, you don't think that is because of the COVID pneumonia, then you have to consider other things, especially pulmonary embolism and heart failure. So a diagnosis of pulmonary embolism or heart failure should be considered for women persisting with chest pain or worsening of the hypoxia, or in women breathlessness persists or worsens beyond the expected recovery from the COVID-19, then you have to think of these two important things, pulmonary embolism and heart failure. So such patients need additional tests like echocardiogram or a CT pulmonary angiogram. And when to deliver? It is again decided on the obstetric count. For an obstetric reason, if you have to deliver the patient, you deliver it. Sometimes, for resuscitative purpose, on an individual basis, you have to consider, especially if it is beyond 26 to 28 weeks, because sometimes you have to empty the uterus, then only you can do a proper resuscitation. Because you all know that the COVID pneumonia, the prone ventilation is the one that is recommended. Again, in a pregnant lady, it's very difficult to do a prone ventilation. Even a left lateral position, semi-recumbent position, all these things are difficult. So if the multidisciplinary team consider that you need to empty the uterus, then you have to go for the especially at this early pregnancy, you have to consider doing a cesarean section or a hysterectomy. If invasive ventilation is needed, most of the time we have to consider doing delivery. And it has to be decided by the MDT. And about the mode of delivery, again, based on the obstetric condition and again, based on the emergency situation. If you have to deliver the baby quickly for the maternal reason or a fetal reason, sometimes you have to go for a cesarean section. Labor management, a continuous monitoring with the CTG is recommended because there are reports of the fetal heart rate alteration in patients with COVID positive patients. And in addition to that, you have to assess the severity of the COVID status. So you have to monitor the temperature, pulse rate, respiratory rate, and SpO2. So along with the other routine obstetric monitoring. And there should be a dedicated labor room and OT. Better to have a negative pressure labor room and OT. Even if it is not available, we can convert a room or a usual OT into a COVID OT or COVID labor room. There should be only a minimum staff, but they should wear adequate PPE. Labor analgesia is not a contraindication, and most of the time it is beneficial. Most of the time, Endonox again can be considered. The best thing is always the epidural. And as a normal pregnancy delivery, you can go for delayed cord clamping. It's not necessary to do a early cord clamping, and we always advise thin skin contact with the mother. Again, companion during labor is again difficult in COVID time, but if the facilities are available, you can consider companion during labor. It's not contraindicated. Or cesarean is done for obstetric indications or if emergency delivery is needed. But one important thing you have to remember that donning PPE for emergency cesarean section is time consuming. So if there is a fetal distress or something immediately to deliver, there may be some lag in time of delivery. So you have to consider a low threshold cesarean section. That may be the reason for high cesarean section rate in COVID positive pregnancies. Postpartum, always you have to consider thromboprophylaxis. You have to give thromboprophylaxis throughout the period of hospital stay. And even after discharge from the hospital for at least 10 days, you have to give heparin or normal heparin. Is there a possibility of vertical transmission? Even though it is uncommon, there are reports of vertical transmission. Even in our center, actually we are doing a multi-center study involving all the major medical colleges in Kerala. And according to that, there's the positive rate is about 14%, baby getting positive. But fortunately, none of the babies are severely affected, or there are no neonatal death reported because of the COVID positivity of the newborn. Again, it's not affected by the mode of delivery, delayed cord clamping, skin-to-skin contact, method of feeding, or rooming in. Rooming in and breastfeeding is recommended. It should be actually a shared decision making. You have to discuss with the parents of the patient as a husband. But if they have decided for a breastfeeding and roaming in, adequate precaution has to be taken to prevent infection to the baby. The mother has to wear a mask. Proper hand hygiene has to be used, and if possible, keep the neonate 6 feet away from the mother. Sometimes you have to go for a temporary separation. Proper counseling has to be done for that. There is no risk of viral transmission more than 10 days since the symptoms first appear. So positive cases after 10 days, there is no risk of transmission. So definitely you can go for roaming in. There is no place for a temporary separation of these things. But sometimes the mother is ill or immunocompromised, such cases you have to go for a temporary separation. If the mother is too ill or the neonate is in the higher risk of infection, sometimes the baby is in the NICU, such cases you have to go for consider temporary separation. Temporarily separated mothers can express breast milk, and they can give it to the mother, because even though there are reports of virus present in the breast milk, the studies does not show there's an increased risk of the babies getting infection after breastfeeding. How you discharge the patient? Again, as in a normal patient, RAD negativity is not essential. Planned discharge as in other patients. No symptoms for 72 hours. Again, you can discharge not on antibiotics or oxygen. No fatigue. Lab results are normal. And again, the coordinate advice is given as in the general population. That is 17 days after the positive result or the start of symptom. Then what about the pregnancies that continue even after the COVID negative or the COVID positive? The care remain unchanged for asymptomatic and those with mild symptoms. Hospitalized patients plan the next antenatal visit at the time of discharge. If it is the first trimester or the early second trimester, a detailed anomaly scan has to be done. Growth scan is recommended 2 weeks following the recovery or depending upon the individual case. Then another very interesting topic nowadays is about the COVID vaccine. Is it safe? Again, now there is no doubt that it's safe. The only concern about the Covishield is about the vaccine-induced thrombocytopenia, thrombocytosis. Again, it's a very rare complication that occur in about 1 in 1 lakh to 1 in 2.5 lakhs cases. Again, it is an idiosyncratic reaction. We cannot predict in which patients it develops. So it's very rare. So again, if you consider the advantages of giving COVID vaccine, then it is better. So irrespective of the gestational age, we can recommend COVID vaccine pregnancy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, doctor, for this wonderful presentation. So I'm requesting all the doctors. Now our platform is open for a Q&A session. If any doctor is having any doubts or query, you can just unmute yourself or you can raise your hand. So I will unmute individually.
So one question that is
Yes,
raised
sir.
is at what
From
gestation COVID vaccination can be given,
given. Yes, sir.
irrespective of the gestation age. At any whatever time you see the patient, you can give. The only problem is if the date is same, if she's going to deliver within 10 days or something, then skip it. Then go for the postpartum vaccination.
So one more question is there.
So another thing is, can you please tell which anti-TCP? Any anti-TCP you can use. There is no problem. It's not contraindication.
Yeah. One more question from Dr. Mahendra. What is your opinion on monoclonal antibodies being administered in pregnancy?
Again, the one that is used is the tocilizumab. There are no studies on it, but if it is indicated, definitely you can give this. There are some new monoclonal antibodies that is suggested. Again, on the individual case-to-case basis, you have to consider.
When to administer vaccine and which one? One more question from Dr. Rita Nath.
You can administer vaccine at any time in pregnancy or even before planning pregnancy, you can give it. There is no contraindication. First trimester you can give, second trimester, third trimester. The only problem is if she is very near to delivery or a surgery, then skip it.
Okay. Yeah. So
Any
Dr.
precautions to the baby? Nothing. Actually, baby is protected. There is a transfer of this antibody to the baby also. So there is more antibody response with vaccine rather than with the infection. So the babies are also protected. Any precautions for baby? As India has asked, can we give aspirin in postnatal period in the symptomatic COVID positive patient? Again, it's a controversial thing. I know India, the Kerala government guideline is given, the aspirin is recommended, but the best thing is heparin. Another question is aspirin helpful for prevention of COVID vaccine thrombosis? Again, COVID vaccine thrombosis is a very, very rare thing. And again, it's an idiosyncratic reaction. So nothing will prevent that if it occur. So we cannot predict in which patient it will occur. It's a very rare thing. It occurs in 1 in 1 lakh to 1 in 2.5 lakhs. So that is incidence.
One more question from Dr. Prabha. How long it will take for dimer to come back to normal?
See that depends upon the cases. Actually, D-dimer, we don't have to do the repeatedly D-dimer. The only thing is if there is a risk factor, or if you think that the patient is worsening or something, then only we repeat the D-dimer. And again, if the D-dimer is increasing, then you have to consider even increasing the dose of low molecular weight heparin. So otherwise, we don't have to make the D-dimer normal to stop the heparin. Again, the usual recommendation is give heparin throughout the period of hospital stay and for 10 days after discharge. any congenital anomaly due to viral infection reported? Nothing to my knowledge. Pre and post-operative steps in COVID positive patients. Again, we all know that we have to wear the adequate PPE, all these things. Is that institutional delivery must better to go for an institutional delivery because we have to wear the PPE. Should we go for CT chest with the lead shield, and how many times we can go for it? See, the chest X-ray and CT exposure does not cause much radiation exposure to the baby. So again, if you go for a abdominal shielding, no problem. We can repeat the CT 3 or 4 times. You can repeat the CT safely. Anybody wants to make any suggestion? Any sharing of the experience?
Doctor, you can raise your hand, so I will unmute yourself, and you can open your video also.
Role of intubation, as in again non-pregnant ladies, when the SpO2 is less than 90, and you try the non-invasive ventilation, then we have to consider. Again, it has to be decided by multidisciplinarity. Again, if she needs an intubation in pregnancy, that means that is an indication most of the time for a delivery.
Two comments are there. Excellent presentation from Dr. Chandrahar and Dr. Anju Kanoja.
Which vaccine do you suggest? Any vaccine that is available, we can give, no problem. All the vaccines available in India are safe because there is no live vaccine available. So you can go for any vaccine that is available. Covishield, Covaxin, Sputnik, available. Till what gestation? Again, the problem in pregnancy is after 26 weeks, very difficult to go for a proning. It's very difficult. So up to that gestation, we can go for a proning, no problem. But after that, again, you can consider otherwise you can modify. Even there are some suggestions to modify the bed. So you can make a well-like area in the bed, and then you can prone. So all these things are suggested and tried, but again, still very difficult. After 28 weeks, very difficult to prone. I think there is no more questions now.
Yes. Sir, one more question is there.
What protective gear will you suggest for obstetrician OPD? Again, the adequate PPE. What usually we recommend is N95 mask and a face shield. Of course, you have a surgical gown and the gloves, that is okay. Previously, we used to recommend cover and all these things, but now the most important thing is the N95 mask. Oral steroids to be started at home isolation or only IV steroids when admitted. Home isolation patients, there is no much place for oral steroids. If there is a cough beyond 5 days, you can go for a butynoside inhalation. But in the hospital, again, there are definite indications for starting steroids. That is, the SpO2 is falling below 90. There's a bronchopneumonia. The 6-minute walk test is positive. Or marked inflammation, rise in the pro-inflammatory markers, then you have to go for oral steroids or IV steroids. Again, oral or IV depending upon the situation. Again, the severity and whether the patient can take orally for this disease. Respirator again is a controversial thing, but N95 mask is the one that is usually recommended. Antibody testing for checking immunity, is it efficient? No. Again, no. What do you call? No antibody testing is recommended now. Again, whether it is present or adequate amount or all these things, we don't know. The best thing is to go for vaccination. Then don't do any antibody testing. What about doing a rapid antibody test before pre-operative case? Again, if you're planning a surgery, elective surgery, I think we have to consider doing a RT-PCR rather than the rapid antigen test. Or a TrueNet. Definitely, in emergency, you can go for a rapid antigen test, no problem. But still, you have to consider it as a positive case and take all precautions. You have to do the surgery in a dedicated area. Yeah. What the Palisa mentioned about its near time. So it's true. If she is going to deliver within 10 days, better avoid it. The third trimester also we can give, but very near to time, better to skip it. So again, a practical suggestion. When the vaccine is very safe, we all have taken vaccine. We know that the experience. In the first 2 or 3 days, there will be fever, some myalgia, over these things. So that is the reason for saying avoid in near time.
One more is question from Dr.
How
Shikha.
many months we can have immunity? Again, nobody knows about it. There are reports of reinfections after, even within 3 months after the COVID infection. So we cannot say that after COVID infection, there will be immunity. Is it enough?
Mm,
Thank you.
yes. From
So rather than questions, we can make any suggestions or any all these things. It's welcome.
Yeah.
You can share your experience.
Dr. Sintha, you have raised your hand. I have unmute you. You can share.
Hello, sir.
Yeah. Cynthia.
So we had a case of postnatal thrombosis at 6 weeks. Actually, she was an asymptomatic COVID patient, COVID positive patient, discovered COVID positive, RT-PCR positive after delivery. And she presented at 6 weeks postnatally with pain of leg, lower leg. And there was thrombosis up to the external iliac vein.
Yeah, that is a problem. Even there are reported deaths also after postpartum infection.
Yes.
About this patient again, was she given heparin?
No, she was not given a heparin. She
That is the
left
reason.
against medical advice.
Yeah, that is the reason we recommend heparin for 10
Heparin.
days throughout the
Yes.
stay in the hospital, as well as 10 days after discharge from the hospital.
Yes.
So especially for postpartum patients, you have to give heparin. And again, you have to assess the VTS, the venous thromboembolism scoring, the risk scoring. And
So in
if it is-
every patient, we can do D-dimer after before
Yeah,
discharge.
definitely. I think more than D-dimer, if the risk is quite high, you have to give prolonged heparin. So,
Yes, sir, yes.
and even otherwise, you have to give heparin.
Heparin for 10 days postnatal.
Yeah, 10 days, not 10 days, even 10 days after discharge from the hospital. So if she's in the hospital for 5 days, you give 5 days and then 10 more days. So that is a recommendation. There
She
are
was
reports
not
of
a high risk
death.
patient. Yes,
Even
sir.
if it is a low risk patient, if it is a COVID positive patient, the
Patient, we have
postpartum,
to
we
give
have to
heparin.
always, yeah, that is the one.
Yes, sir.
Again, yesterday one patient here also admitted in our hospital. Actually, she delivered on 5th July. That is on now it's the 12th postnatal day. It was normal delivery.
Yes,
She
sir.
was not COVID positive at that time. Now
Yes.
she came with a heart failure. Mostly she acquired the infection from our hospital. COVID positive, heart failure, and even so all the complications can occur. It's almost like a cardiomyopathy. So postpartum is we should be very careful.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, one more question is there. Can blood transfusion be done in COVID positive patient with severe anemia?
Of course, you can give. So if the blood transfusion is indicated, definitely we have to go for. Again, the better go for a vaccine than whole blood transfusion. Anyway, it was a nice experience.
Yes, sir.
When the
One more.
D-dimer level comes to normal in a normal pregnancy after delivery, so that we can compare in an undiagnosed case of COVID-19? Very healthy question. Okay. So D-dimer is will be elevated usually in the late pregnancy as well as in the postpartum period. So that is the reason we give heparin.
Sir, we'll wait some couple of minutes if any question is there, or else we can conclude, sir. So, sir, anything would you like to add? Yeah, so one more question is there. When should vaccination be recommended in pregnant women recovered from COVID?
Again, that should be depending upon your state recommendation.
Hmm.
Usually the recommendation is 3 months after infection, you have to consider giving vaccine. And again, there are a lot of things. If she gets if she has taken a vaccine, a single dose of vaccine, and just imagine she get an infection later, then can we give second dose? Again, the recommendation by the government is go for the vaccine after delivery. Again, it's a controversial thing. Why should we wait for the till delivery? Why can't we wait for 3 months just like other patients? So in non-pregnant patients, recommendation is 3 months after the infection you can give. So the same recommendation I think is possible in pregnancy also. But in the recent government guideline is given that after getting first COVID vaccine, if she gets a COVID infection, the second dose is recommended only after delivery. But if she gets a COVID infection in the pregnancy and you are starting the new schedule of vaccine, definitely you can give the first dose of vaccine 3 months after the COVID infection and the second dose as usual. And one usual question about the vaccination is, can we give the Tdap or any TT immunization along with the COVID vaccine? But again, when a patient comes for TT or Tdap, the first preference is always now the COVID vaccine. So you give COVID vaccine. Simultaneously, you can give COVID vaccine and TT, no problem. But if she has to take TT or Tdap later, then wait for 2 weeks. I think you got it. Simultaneously, you can give COVID vaccine and TT. Then, if you are delaying one vaccine, then give it only after 2 weeks. Should not be given within 2 weeks time. Pratik is there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. So yeah, thank you so much, sir. It was a very wonderful discussion and a presentation, and a very short
Thank you,
notice to have
and all the-
confirmed
all the-
this webinar. So thank you so much, sir. I would like to invite Mr. Sri Kumar. He is also there. Sri sir. Sir, please unmute yourself. Mm,
think Sri is
Yeah,
muted.
must be. Is, so, sir, everyone is sharing. It's a thank you, and it's a wonderful webinar. Everyone is sharing their comment. So yes, sir, it's a very wonderful discussion, and it's a very necessary nowadays, like management of COVID pregnant women. So I think Shri sir must be traveling, or I don't know. I will call him and let you know.
Sir,
Yeah. Okay.
evening,
Yes.
good
Yes.
evening. Actually, it is very informative, sir. I think all the these participants are very much happy regarding the discussion. So well discussed. Thanks a lot for the support, sir.
Thank you, Sri.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. So thank you so much, sir, and thank you all the faculties who have joined. So yes, sir, we'll provide you the recording link also on the mail as well as on the WhatsApp. And yes, thank you so much, Dr. Ajit. I will provide you a recording link also for your reference.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank
yes.
you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you
Now
for the
we'll, yeah.
opportunity.
Thank
Yes.
you, sir.
we'll-
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, can I leave?
Yes, sir. We'll end.
Okay.
Yes, sir,
Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you.
Yes. Yes. Thank
Yeah,
you, sir. Bye bye. Good day.
Bye.